If we go back like a couple hundred years, it was pretty normal to own slaves. Is that right or correct?
Why are we talking about slavery?
Because I'm showing you why the ad populum fallacy is a logical fallacy.
Honestly, back then, a lot of Black people participated in the slave trade themselves. So
yeah, that doesn't make slavery right. Are you trying to defend slavery?
It was a product of the time, dude.
Are you trying to defend slavery?
Did you not see Matt Walsh's new video on this topic?
I did, and I think that defending slavery is cringe as
defending slavery, but I think we're illogical if we didn't realize that a lot of Black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
Well, how do you know that Black people enjoyed being slaves?
I mean, it's just in history. I've read about a lot of Black people not only participated in capturing slaves, but a lot of Black people enjoyed being slaves. Because of course, when you're really? Brought up doing something like being a slave your whole life, it's all you know. I'm sure a lot of slaves probably enjoyed it and were happy because that's the only lifestyle they were aware of.
That's crazy.
Can you not think like that? Is it really that dense?
I have never heard of somebody enjoying having to work countless hours on a plantation, being dehumanized and whipped and told that they're not human and being beaten within an inch of their life and being
saying that
I don't think that people enjoy that.
You can't deny the fact that there were probably slave owners that, just like there were really bad ones, there were probably slave owners that probably treated their slaves really nice too, right? You're not thinking logically. You're being so dense.
So I'm just going to say that in general, I think it's wrong to own humans.
Of course. We're not in that time period anymore.
But you're defending slavery.
I'm not defending it. I'm saying it was a product of the time.
You said that Black people enjoyed being slaves.
I think there were probably a good majority of Black people who back then were born and raised as slaves, probably because that's the only thing they knew. It was the environment they grew up in. If they had a slave owner who treated them well, they probably enjoyed their lives, a few of them. I think it's illogical to believe that every person who was a slave back then hated their life. I truly think that's illogical. I do.
I'm pretty sure that being owned is not a good thing.
Because you grew up in this generation and this is what you've been taught. And we know these things now.
No,
but back then,
not just because
those societal standards were not created yet.
Not just because I grew up in this generation, but because I can think logically and morally on this topic and why it is unfair to own another human based off of their birth as having a certain skin color, for example. That's unfair.
I'm pretending
and
I'm saying it's okay to own slaves now, because that's not what I'm insinuating.
You are defending slavery.
I'm not defending it. I'm just giving you the facts. Aren't you all about facts over feelings?
Yeah, and I believe that slavery is immoral.
Right, and I do too. But the fact was, back then, I think you're illogical if you think that some of them didn't enjoy being slaves or enjoy their lives.
Why would anyone enjoy being a slave?
That's the environment you grew up in. That's all you've ever known. So if you grew up in that environment and you have a slave owner who treats you well, that's just all they know. So they probably were happy about it. They didn't know freedom. Why is it so hard for you to understand this?
What does a slave owner treating their slave well look like?
I mean, back then, I'm sure some of them, I'm pretty sure they fed them, right? Or probably that they weren't whipping anybody or not tormenting anyone. Just I don't have specific details for you.
Okay, as long as you're working inhumane hours on plantations, but you're being fed, then that's a good thing.
Again, I'm not saying slavery was a good thing. You're not going to try to make it seem like that's what I'm saying, because I don't know what you want me to say. If you want to believe that every person back then who was a slave hated their life, go for it.
21st century and talk about slavery constantly as if it happened to you, as if you were on some slave ship somewhere, as if you were on some plantation somewhere. You who hasn't even lived 40 years. You who doesn't even remember what life before the internet looked like. You who lives in the softest, most comfortable age in the history of the human race. You who lives in rich countries with rights and opportunities that most human beings on this earth cannot even fathom. And you spend your life crying daily about slavery as something that had nothing to do with you. Some of you even want free money, right? Somebody should come and give you free money because some person who had nothing to do with you was enslaved in Cuba 400 years ago. Shut up and sit down. I hear this crap all the time. And listen, if any one of you wants to come and deal with me on this one, bring it. I want all the smoke with you. You know who you want, right? You, yeah, slave. Bring it. Shut up and sit down.
To take this moment to realize that people of color, and especially queer people of color, and especially Black queer people have no obligation to instantly trust white queer people, okay? Clearly we can, and many of us do, put our whiteness and our privilege above our queerness. But let this be proof that trans people are exactly who they say they are. They are men, women, and non-binary people of trans experience. We are not some out-of-control woke liberal ideology, or else stuff like this would not come spewing out of some of our mouths. And just in case some of you have missed this point before, queer liberation is impossible without Black liberation. So start following and listening to Black creators.
That's why they don't want to teach critical race theory, and this is why they're politicizing it and bringing it to extremisms, to make sure that we don't have a narrative on our truth, right? Your people dug up mummies and ate them for a beauty standard. Your people captured us, cut off our genitalia, and put them in museums. There are vintage furniture, that is filled with our hair because your people cut our hair off and used it as plush. You used our skin as leather for bookcasings. You built zoos and put us next to animals in cages on display, right? The first pornographic entertainment, earliest, was Sarah Bartman, who y'all cut her genitalia off and used her organs and experimented and put them up in a museum. You used our babies as alligator bait and then proceeded to put them on stamps and use it as a mailing across the world. What is wrong with you? You had picnics under burning bodies. Picnics. Then took pictures of those picnics. Then made postage stamps. Postage stamps. I need you to get into what your grandparents were into. We talk about pathology and we talk about how memories are passed down and fears and stuff. You wonder why we have animosity towards you today, because the violence is so ancestral that it is in our veins to not like you. It is literally inbred in us. It is survival. Our hair stands up when we're around you. That's ancestral. I need you to get into what kind of witchcraft your people are into till this day, because sex trafficking and collecting embryos and collecting children and women and men and energy, I need you to get into what your people are into. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. We will never forget. We will never be silent. We will always make sure you know. Never.
Okay, I cannot even fathom how triggered y'all must be seeing these two white women have this conversation and clips on your FYP. It's just absolutely fucking bizarre. So I'm just tuning in as someone whose dad's a total Trumpster, Marine vet from Texas, right? And I've seen a lot of my mutuals stitching the part of the conversation where she's like, I'm not defending it, but it was a product of the times. It was normal there. And they're like, oh, so you're saying it was okay in that time period? Yes, absolutely. This is that narrative where you like bring up horrible things that the founding fathers or someone from like 100 years ago did. And other people will be like, you cannot judge people from the past by today's moral standards. And I want to call absolute bullshit on that, because if you read history, people who oppose them existed then. And this is why we don't have CRT, so that we don't align with abolitionists and get the job done.
Asking for music that is unique to the Americas, because that would be Native Americans and other indigenous groups. I'm talking about specifically the United States. And maybe you got a good guess on that. By the way, this is my first time using the inverted filter, so please forgive me. Okay, if you said blues or jazz, you are wrong, because those developed post-Civil War and in the 20th century. The oldest form of music that is unique to the United States is the minstrel show. And this was started because a washed-up actor saw an enslaved black person singing outside a theater he was working at and got the song out of him. And then he went backstage, painted his face black, went on stage, performed, and it was a huge hit, and the whole thing just caught like wildfire. And minstrel shows would also become not just the earliest form of music unique to the United States, but also the birth of American popular culture. Because it was also kind of like a variety show. People do sketches and tell jokes. And these minstrel shows were responsible for promoting a lot of the negative stereotypes about black people we have today, such as hypersexuality, ignorance, laziness, and enjoying slavery. So, what this person is doing here is nothing more than just promoting minstrel show propaganda. If you'd like a good discussion on this topic, I do highly recommend the essay on music from the 1619 Project, and I also got information out of my college-level music history textbook. Once again, as I've just said, this is nothing more than minstrel show propaganda.
Go over the worst punishments for slavery together, and then at the end, you guys let me know if you would enjoy this in the comments. And we're going to do the top 5 I think are the worst. Number 1 is mutilation. I'm not going to go into this one because TikTok might take this video down, but use your imagination. Number 2, whippings, which is George Washington's personal favorite. In America, slaves, including pregnant women and children, were often whipped as punishment. Some owners did not stop there. When their slaves' wounds began to heal, these owners ordered that these wounds be split open and products such as red pepper and turpentine be applied to the gashes. Public burnings, which are often an example to other slaves what would happen if you disobeyed. Forced reproduction, one of the worst ones in my opinion, because not only are you going to go through the horrors of slavery, they're going to force you to have a child and make the child go through the same things. Suspended beneath a cooking fire, this is what Harriet Jacobs said her slave master's favorite punishment was. But yeah, that's it. Let me know if you guys think these are enjoyable things that black people went.
So if you haven't watched the full video, go back and watch it for context's sake. But the person with the blonde hair keeps making the point that slavery was a product of the time. And because it was a product of the time and many people who were enslaved were born into slavery, that some of them must have enjoyed their lives or enjoyed their conditions of being enslaved. And like lots of thoughts on that. It could make a very long video just refuting that point. But I also wonder if this person would be so bold as to suggest that other groups of oppressed people like enjoyed their condition in the same way she's implying that people enjoyed slavery. She keeps saying it's a product of the time. That was the societal norm. People didn't know any better. And she keeps using the word like enjoy their life, like their life, in reference to enslaved people. And again, I just wonder if this person would be willing to make those same assumptions about things like back in the 1900s when it was very commonplace in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s to like beat the life out of your wife, like men beating their wives or being abusive to their children. Did those women just like love their lives? Did they love that experience of being beaten up over small things, over things they shouldn't be getting physically abused over? Would you say that same thing about the Holocaust and young children who didn't really know anything other than the Holocaust? Or would you say that they like loved and enjoyed their lives? I think it's really callous to assume that you can speak on behalf of a group that you're not even a part of. Like, I wouldn't even begin to speak on behalf of enslaved people because I have never been enslaved. That wasn't my experience. I have no idea what it's like to be enslaved in that way and to go through the atrocities of slavery. And as a black woman, I still don't feel qualified to even make assumptions about what black people during that time felt. And so I just think I don't know the word that I'm looking for. It's something at its finest to see a white, I'm not sure of gender, so a white person claiming that they can speak for enslaved people. And not just that they can speak for enslaved people, but they can say that enslaved people enjoyed being enslaved. Yeah, I just wanted to share because it just had really been bothering me. And I just think that nobody should assume that they have the right to speak on behalf of any group. Speak for yourself.
I don't think I have words for this.
It's 6:30 in the morning. I haven't slept yet. I've been stuck all night in this quagmire of absolute bullshit that this person has been spewing on the internet. Normally I try to keep my page pretty lighthearted, but I felt like this had to be addressed. I don't know, mind-boggling, honestly. This person, by the way, came out with an apology video. She apologized for saying that Black people enjoyed being slaves and said that she should have said that they were comfortable with it because that's all they knew. Actually, you know what? I think I need to let somebody else take this because I don't feel like going to jail anytime soon. I don't think I would do well. The only thing I will say is that as somebody whose Black grandparents worked on a plantation their entire lives and whose great-grandparents also worked on that same plantation and the generations before that, I can assure you nobody enjoyed being a slave. But you know what? Thank you for your opinion. You are right. You do have free speech. And I'm glad you're exercising it so freely and allowing everybody to know exactly what kind of person you are. Have a good night. Also, if any of you feel like having an aneurysm today, please, by all means, go watch those videos. They are videos.
Now, I try not to get into these racial discussions because, I just hate going back and forth, but now I must speak. Obviously, this chick is completely off her rocker. If you enjoy being a slave, you would enjoy being a broodmare and having your family split apart, having your children sold or being raped, having no autonomy, being exploited and working in the hot southern atmosphere in the summertime from sunup to sundown with rags on, with one day off where you had to go to church and eat scraps of food. My dad had me very late in life and he was the youngest son, so my great-grandmother was born a slave. And from what I understand, every morning she got up and whipped the chickens. They said the chickens hardly had feathers, and then she would whip everybody else's ass in the house. And I'm convinced that that was slavery trauma. My great-great-grandfather bought his freedom, but that was not available to most people. I have a couple of foreparents who bought their own freedom. My great-great-grandfather was a blacksmith, a barn raiser, and a horse breaker. So he was able to work off the farm and buy his freedom. But from what I understand, he was cheated out of it the first time. Real big surprise. And this is not something that was available to most slaves. He's just kind of a legendary person and an exceptional person, but most people just had to be born slaves and die slaves, unless they ran away, bought their own freedom, or got killed. I think this woman would be much better off shutting up and picking another subject to make her point, and maybe reading a book and getting a Black friend.
Fun, not so fun fact. There was a pro-slavery psychologist who wrote a paper on something called drapetomania. Now, I'll let you pause and read this. To justify this crusty dusty fart's racism, he literally coined a whole brand new mental illness for enslaved people, saying that they actually liked being slaves, and that if they didn't, they were literally manic. That is spreading some crazy pro-slavery propaganda in this year of 2023. Yikes.
The adversarial troll. She's obviously fishing for the controversy that will end up paying off for her in the future. But let's focus on her message and where it comes from and why it's dangerous. Have you ever heard about the Daughters of the Confederacy? Founded 128 years ago in Nashville, Tennessee, they're still ongoing. Influential women on the south of the United States that managed to win where their husbands lost, which was in the shaping of the minds of the American South. Whitewashing the atrocities of the slave trade and its influence in the American economy, whitewashing the horrors of chattel slavery as somehow a fantasy in which genteel ladies with hooped skirts and broad-brimmed hats strewn with flowers somehow managed to own human beings and still consider them as family. This was in the textbooks of every single one of those adults that you see jeering at Black teenagers trying to go to integrated schools and that are now members of the Senate of the United States. as well as its Congress. But Elliot, that's in the past, you say. Now, is it? Look at what's happening in Florida nowadays. Look at what's happening in the UK. Look at what's happening in France. People are trying to rewrite history books for a reason, because it works. Now let's deal with my favorite. I think we're being illogical. Always remember something about logic. Something can be syllogistically correct and wrong, both morally and in terms of factual truth. You can turn any stupid, vile argument into something logical. Slavery in itself had its heyday in the middle of the Age of Reason. So logic is not a measure for anything. It's an intellectual exercise that can be connected to reality or completely disconnected by it. Or it can be used to justify the unjustifiable, as it did with slavery. Oh, I almost forgot. Hello, Suki. She also goes to say, a lot of black people participated in the chattel slavery trade. Yes. Who's benefiting from it now? Is it any black people? But further than that, despite of the fact that there's more genetic diversity in sub-Saharan Africa than there is in the whole of the rest of the world, when the Portuguese started the transatlantic slave trade with the help of the Catholic Church, they managed to summarize all of that genetic diversity into one skin color. So, from the perspective of the white people who were buying slaves, we were all the same. However, the people who were selling slaves viewed other black people as different people. So they did horrifying things and sold them into slavery, not because they were selling black people, but because they were selling the other. And where are those kingdoms now? Were they all crushed by the slavers who turned colonizers and stripped them of every single asset that they had and continue stripping them of their assets now? And my question again is, who benefited in the long run from all?
Please don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notification. Anytime I upload a video, you will be notified. Stay blessed and